Sunday morning on BBC Radio Scotland.
Hello and welcome to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua. I'm here with you until 10 o'clock today. Coming up, I'm sure every inch of Scotland's Euro game against Germany on Friday has been pored over to learn the lessons from every manoeuvre. We may still be feeling the disappointment, but how important is it to learn from our failures as well as successes in life? We'll discuss that later on in the programme. The moon has held endless fascination for us humans. The countless songs, poems and paintings featuring it are testimony to the wonder and awe it inspires. I'll be speaking about that with Astronomer Royal for Scotland, Catherine Haymans, ahead of a lunar symposium being held in Dumfries and Galloway this week. And in a moment, you can hear my conversation with screenwriter Dav James, the brains behind BBC drama Lost Boys and Fairies, which was inspired by some of his own personal experiences. First, though, let's ease ourselves into this morning with some music. Liam Gallagher's
Daddy was a cop on the east side of Chicago, back in the USA, back in the bad old days. In the heat of a summer night, in the land of the dollar bill, when the town of Chicago died, and they talk about it still. When a man named Al Capone tried to make that town his own, and he called his gang to war with the forces of the law. I heard my mama cry, I heard her pray the night Chicago died. Brother, what a night it really was. Brother, what I thought it really was. Glory be. I heard my mama cry, I heard her pray the night Chicago died. Brother, what a night the people saw. Brother, what a night the people saw. Yes, indeed. And the sound of the battle rang through the streets of the old east side, till the last of the hoodlum gang had surrendered up or died. They were shouting in the street and the sound of running feet. And I asked someone who said, about 100 cops are dead. I heard my mama cry, I heard her pray the night Chicago died. Brother, what a night it really was. Brother, what I thought it really was. Glory be. I heard my mama cry, I heard her pray the night Chicago died. Brother, what a night the people saw. Brother, what I thought the people saw. Yes, indeed. Then there was no sound at all but the clock upon the wall. Then the door burst open wide and my daddy stepped inside, and he kissed my mama's face and he brushed her tears away. The night Chicago died. The night Chicago died. Brother, what a night the people saw. Brother, what a fight the people saw. Yes, indeed. The night Chicago died. The night Chicago died. Brother, what a night it really was. Brother, what a fight it really was. Glory be. The night Chicago died. The night Chicago died. Brother, what a night the people saw.
Now, the three-part BBC drama series Lost Boys and Fairies tells the touching, poignant and sometimes difficult story of gay couple Andy and Gabe who want to adopt a child. We get an intricate look at the adoption process and what this decision means to them as we learn more about the losses and traumas that have brought them to this point. Let's hear a clip from that first episode.
So, boys, tell me, Why do you want to adopt?
Well, we've been talking about it for a while now, haven't we, Gabe? Mm-hmm. And we're really solid. Been together 8 years now, so it feels like the natural next step, doesn't it?
Mm. I'm sensing you're a little bit nervous, Gabriel.
I'm not nervous.
Good. Just answer honestly and we'll all get along fine. Are you married?
No.
Not that it's a problem.
Gabriel thinks it's heteronormative. That he thinks it's what straight couples do when they've run out of things to say.
You can catch the final instalment of that tomorrow night on BBC One Scotland. However, all three are currently available on the iPlayer. Its creator Dav James has drawn on his own experience of becoming a parent through adoption with his husband. I caught up with him just a few days ago and began by asking him where it all started.
Well, it all came from the fact that it was 8 years ago now, which has gone incredibly fast. I can't quite believe it's gone so fast. But my husband and I adopted our two boys. So our two boys arrived at the same time. We've since gone on to adopt a little girl as well. So we've got 3 kids.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And then when I was going through that, the adoption process and becoming a dad for the first time, it was the most life-changing thing that I've ever experienced. And I think anyone who becomes a parent for the first time knows, it's a huge thing. You go through a kind of existential crisis. And also at the same time, when you're adopting children, it's a sense of you're dealing with these beings who are already fully formed, who've lived through trauma. There was a lot of emotions happening under one roof. And I'd also lost my mum just under a year previously. So I was still grieving her, really. And she never got to meet them. And as I was going through all of these feelings and emotions, I just remember thinking, my goodness, and as a writer, I'm always thinking about story, aren't I? But I thought, there is a drama. Not only because I felt like what I was experiencing was really dramatic. And also, I suppose I didn't feel like I'd seen adoption authentically represented on screen before, but also it was a way for me to manage my emotions, to process them. I could not but write, actually. I was just compelled to do it. I had to write it.
Now, Dav, I should say it's not autobiographical, but is there something about having to confront and really deal with your own past before you bring a child into your life that you're familiar with?
Absolutely. And also I suppose ever since I first started writing, my very first play that was produced was a Welsh language play called Llwyth, which is it was a first Welsh language gay play by a gay playwright. And it was my way of writing my identity and processing, I suppose, the conflict I felt between what was my queer identity and my Welsh language identity. And in the process of writing, I actually cathartically realised there wasn't as much of a conflict as I thought there was. And that was the journey I went on. So I've always done that. I've always delved into my past and the trauma of growing up as a gay child in the 1980s, when Thatcher was still in power, when Section 28 was still in power, when we couldn't talk about sexuality in schools, when I thought it was wrong, when I grew up thinking that I was an abomination because I was also very religious. I went to chapel twice a day, and I believed that Satan was going to be taking me to hell at that time. That's what I believed. And it was living in my mind as a child was like living in a horror film. And I think it's really important to still acknowledge that even though we've made such extraordinary leaps and bounds in terms of equality, and now we can marry and adopt, and we don't need to feel that shame anymore. But the shame, if you've lived it as a child for the decades of your life, is still part of your embodied experience. It's still in your body, and whether or not that's through addiction or whether or not that's through perfectionism, whether or not that's from internalized homophobia. And so I wanted to write about that because, of course, when you become a parent and you're dealing with children who have lived through trauma, all of that stuff comes back out. You remember what it was for you to be a child. and the realization that I needed to do some work in order to process that, in order to become a better parent.
And those themes, that trauma and loss that you experienced in your own life, that you were looking to address, and part of that process, of course, was writing this, very much pours into the story we see play out on screen. And Gabe in particular, you know, he's lost his mum when he was a very young boy. He's bullied. He faces a lot of homophobia, particularly from his father, who is very Christian, very strict. And that results in even more trauma in his life. He suffers addiction, lots of self-loathing there. But, you know, he does find love and support as an adult, which helps him through that. Tell us about what that legacy was like for Gabe as a character. Because he's quite complicated, isn't he?
He's very, very complicated. And he has, you know, he's experienced all that as a child. I think it's really interesting and important to say, actually, the relationship with his father is an interesting one, because even though from Gabe, this is the thing that I've learned. We often play the scenes out through our own perspective now. And actually, other characters in those scenes also have perspectives that we may not be privy to. And that's also part of Gabe's journey as well with his dad, whereas his memories are these flashes of when his dad was actually traumatizing him, I suppose. But also there's a gradual evolution in the show where he realizes his dad was grieving in the same way that, you know, that's something he was going through his own trauma too and couldn't articulate this. So there's a level of understanding and compassion, I think, that comes from both perspectives that Gabe gets towards his father. But of course, Gabe is also, I think, you know, you might watch the show and go, oh gosh, you know, well, he does. Gabe needs to grow up. If that's the whole, it's a coming of middle-aged drama. And Andy, some might think at the beginning, why is Andy with Gabe? Because Andy is just so loving and caring. And, you know, there's this understanding of, but the thing is, Andy has also gone through his own trauma, but it manifests itself in a different way.
Very different.
Yes, his mother says, you know, you're lucky. Your trauma makes you behave like a saint. Because he has such abandonment issues. He can do nothing but parent Gabriel and look after him and nurture him because he's terrified that he's going to leave him. But Andy also sees in Gabe that actually his behavior isn't because he's not a good person. It's because he's been through such terrible ordeals in his life. And Andy can see that he's worth loving. And that's the thing about I wanted to put on screen. You know, let's look at humans from different perspectives and why people are deserving of compassion and love. And that's what I hope this story dramatizes.
I really liked the term you used earlier, the coming of middle age, that kind of drama, because most people I certainly loved and grew up watching lots of coming of age films. But this idea of coming of middle age is a really interesting one. And actually what you do in this story is sort of explore one of the reasons why people would like to have children, or the many reasons people decide to have children. You know, you might not think very deeply about confronting your own past, but actually one thing I did wonder when I was watching this is just how important it is for every parent to confront their childhood trauma before welcoming a child into their own life.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's so interesting because what we realize and what a lot of our friends who are parenting birth children have said, they went, my God, we would have so benefited.
I can imagine.
From actually, even though it, you know, some people go, isn't it intrusive? And I go, well, actually, I never felt it was intrusive because I knew it was done for all the right reasons. It's from a child-centered perspective. Because as you say, I think it's really important that we reflect and look back, and just so that we can identify what our trigger points are and why things might make us behave in a certain way. And I'm not saying it's easy, you know, even if you know that doesn't make you, you know, I'm not saying that in those situations I am a brilliant parent at all because I get it wrong all the time. But I do feel like I have the capacity to go, okay, that's why that happened. And to apologize for my children for when, you know, if I lose my temper, whatever, and to explain to them that we are all human and that we get things wrong. And then actually what's important more than anything else is if you do get things wrong, that you have the opportunity to repair as well with your kids.
We won't go into the details of the final episode, but, you know, we do see possibilities of healing and hope. So how did your own process going through adoption, how did it change your life and what did it give you in your own healing journey?
I mean, It's a really profound question because it has changed me completely, not only as a human, but as an artist as well, I said, because Lost Boys wouldn't exist without it.
Yeah.
And actually, I've always written from personally inspired, but I feel like my field of vision when I started off was quite a narrow one, actually, possibly. But what happens when you adopt, your children's stories become part of your own, and you are asked to understand like their experiences that you've never come close to experiencing, actually. And also to think about why that has happened socially, why that has happened within their family, why that has happened with their birth parents. And a massive journey I went on, I think, at the beginning of the process. You think about, well, these children have been adopted, and in a way, it's very easy to consider the birth parents in this situation as monsters. And I think a lot of people do. And that isn't a useful concept, to dehumanize people and to think of them as monsters, because actually most of the time, and a lot of the time, the things have gone wrong in that family. They're generational. You know, birth parents actually have not been modeled love, and they have come from a history of violence or a cycle of violence that is kind of systemic socially and within the family. And adoption intercepts that, of course, but so that we can start healing that circle. But I also think we as a society need to look at what is going on culturally, that people aren't getting that love and that compassion so that they can learn how to treat their own children with love and compassion. You know, we've got to start from the roots.
That was Daft James there. It was so brilliant to speak to him about his new 3-part drama series. And a reminder that the last episode of Lost Boys and Fairies is on tomorrow night on BBC One, but you can catch the whole series on the BBC iPlayer. Now, later on in the hour, we'll hear from journalist Jen Stout about her extraordinary escape from Russia to reporting on Ukraine. And in a moment, we'll reflect on the wonder and awe the moon inspires with Astronomer Royal for Scotland, Catherine Haymans. And to get us in the mood,
Blue moon, you saw me standing alone, without a dream in my heart, without a love of my own. Blue moon,
Now, today marks the first day of the 2024 International Lunar Symposium. Over 150 of the world's most prominent lunar scientists will gather in Dumfries and Galloway, exchanging ideas and discussing the latest findings from their research in lunar exploration. It's the first time the international event will be held in Scotland, which is surprising considering the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, had Scottish connections. But it's not just the scientific community that's been fascinated by the moon. For millennia, the moon has captured the human imagination. It's a symbol of transience, rebirth, and even insanity. It has great cultural significance. And here with me now to give us an insight into lunar exploration, as well as human understanding and connection to the moon, is the Royal Astronomer for Scotland, Professor Catherine Haymans. Catherine, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Zara. Good morning. Yes, it's exciting. Lots of scientists from across the world, 150 different scientists all working on lunar exploration, coming to Dumfries and Galloway today to discuss the moon and our heritage here in Scotland of Clan Armstrong, Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon, almost 55 years ago now.
Wow. It's amazing when you think of just how much we know and how much we see about the moon from even a very young age, from children's books. I often heard the statistic that we know more about space than we do about the sea. Is it true? Do we know so much about the moon? What exactly do we know, and how did it come to be?
Well, yeah, no, you're right. We do know a lot about the moon these days, and I think that it's the exploration of the bottom of the ocean is less known than the exploration of the surface of the moon, because it's easy to see the moon. You just need to look up into the night sky, and it is there. The interest in the moon has really exploded recently. We've seen lots of new space landers landing on the moon. Most recently, India landed their Chandrayaan rover on it. The Chinese Chang'e lander is there right now. Japan also had a lander. So lots of different international interest in exploring the moon and learning more about how it originated in our solar system.
You mentioned there, obviously, there's a kind of another space race with the moon taking centre stage again, and obviously China's fourth landing in the past 12 months, as you mentioned. India and also Japan have set down a spacecraft on the lunar surface, and NASA plans to have humans back on the moon by 2026. What does this sort of new era of lunar exploration mean for the human understanding of it?
So there's new interest in the moon, partly because technology and innovation has progressed so far now that it's now more affordable to get there. Scientifically, we're interested in its origin. So we believe that the moon used to be part of Earth, sort of just one entity, but a giant asteroid collision event happened about 4.5 billion years ago that separated the moon from the Earth. And if that theory is correct, then we'd expect the chemical composition of the moon to be very similar to the mantle of our Earth. And the first studies are showing that to be true. We're also really interested in whether humans could have a base on the moon. So, as you said, NASA's planning to have astronauts on the moon by 2026. China is also planning an astronaut site there by 2030. And so is there enough water on the moon to support humans living up there? And that's one of the most exciting things we're going to be learning about soon when the Chang'e lander brings a sample back from the moon. It's an amazing robotic mission, bringing a sample back from the moon to planet Earth at the end of June to tell us more about the water content in the South Pole of the moon, where it's incredibly cold.
I mean, it's always been the subject, isn't it, of sci-fi films. You know, can these planets actually sustain human life? And you're telling us that that's definitely something now that we're looking at. We're really trying to clarify, could people actually live on the moon? Do you think that we as humans sort of have the right to ownership of the moon? Because with this race obviously comes the natural question, who's going to claim the moon as theirs?
Yeah, so in the 70s they they signed something called the Outer Space Treaty that said no country can lay claim to anything in the solar system. So when Neil Armstrong planted the American flag, it wasn't a symbol that the moon now belonged to America. And that treaty has served us well. But now with humanity looking to go out and mine different solar system sources to bring back rare earth metals, for example, from the moon. Now, this question has really come up. Who owns the moon? And I think, humanity, it sort of belongs to everyone. And I think we need to think more about what this means. The moon, for scientists, it's very interesting for us to think about how it originated, what it can tell us about the origin of our solar system and Earth. But I think it has lots of meaning for lots of different people. It's a real symbol of light and darkness in our world. It's always there, but it's constantly changing. For the Navajo Nation in America, it's Grandmother Moon. It's their guardian spirit. It really is a sacred place. And so for them, this concept of mining and ownership is very alien
removed,
to them when the moon is such a special place.
I mean, you're tapping into the interest there, not just of physicists and astronomers, but, different cultures, even songwriters, authors, artists, poets. We all draw information and inspiration from the moon and the stars. And, is there a reason for us to be so captivated by it?
I think it's because it's so clearly there in our night sky. So I was just looking at the weather forecast. We've got patchy cloud cover across Scotland tonight, and it is a waxing gibbous moon at the moment, which is about 3/4 illuminated. So I'd encourage everyone to, if you do have clear skies, just to go out and have a look at the moon tonight, because we often just sort of glance at it and we don't really look at it. If you've got any binoculars that you've used for bird watching, they're absolutely perfect for looking at the moon. Go and see these deep basins, these sort of the dark features. They're known as seas because in old times, when our ancestors didn't really understand the moon, they thought that those dark features were oceans on the moon, and they've got beautiful names like the Ocean of Serenity and Tranquility. There's also a Sea of Crisis and Fertility as well, if you're interested. But these are beautiful features on the moon, well worth looking at through a pair of binoculars. And next Friday it will be a completely full moon. Late Friday night, and this one's known as the strawberry moon. We different full moons have different names. It's not going to be pink or anything. It's just called the strawberry moon, but it's going to be gorgeous to look at. And I think just take some time to just look around this amazing, gorgeous entity in our night sky, and it means different things to different people. But we can all appreciate how beautiful nature is. Not just here on Earth, but out in our solar system and beyond into the universe.
So next Friday's a full moon, which means that a lot of people tend to believe that anything can happen, that things go a bit strange, don't they, in a full moon? People behave weirdly or strangely at those times. As Astronomer Royal for Scotland, how do you feel personally connected to the moon and to the universe?
Yeah, so I'm not an astrologer, although lots of people do often ask me about their star signs. I'm afraid I can't tell you what's going to happen in your future or how the stars are going to affect you on a particular day. But what I do for me, when I look up at the night sky and I look at the stars, and I think about how they were formed. Are there planets around those other stars? Could there possibly be life out there? And for me, it's just a moment of beauty and calm.
Oh, there's a
moment
deep
to just
sense of wonder, isn't
there?
I certainly enjoy my experiences going to Dynamic Earth and having a look, and I think you get a real reflection and sense of perspective, don't you? Catherine, thank you so much for your illuminating insight on lunar exploration and the human connection to space. For more information on the International Lunar Symposium, which is hosted by the Open University in Scotland, you can find that at crichton.co.uk. Now, you're listening to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua, and coming up at 10 is the Sunday Show, and Fiona Stocker joins me now to share with us what's coming up. Good morning to you.
Yes. Morning, Zara. Well, I'm sorry to mention this again, but it's nearly 36 hours since Scotland's bruising defeat at the hands of Germany in the opening game of Euro 2024. A result that, shocked and silenced the usually irrepressible Tartan Army. But we're not out of the tournament yet. Our next match against Switzerland, who did beat Hungary 3-1 yesterday, is only 3 days away. So how does Steve Clarke's team regroup and bounce back? We're going to be speaking to a sports psychologist to find out what the backroom staff might be up to. Euro 2024 might not be on everyone's minds, but there's still an election less than 3 weeks away. And last week, the Scottish party leaders clashed over the cost of living and the NHS on BBC Scotland's debate night. But central to all of this is the economy. At 10:15, Martin will be putting the parties through their paces on the economy. He'll resume his leaders' interviews next week, of course. I'll have a full look at the Sunday papers after 11 with LBC's Scotland political editor Gina Davidson and BBC's former Scotland political editor, now Herald columnist Brian Taylor. So that all coming up, Zara, from 10 o'clock.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you very much, Fiona. I mentioned sports psychologist there about the Euros. We'll also be having a look at just the benefits of winning and losing a little bit later in the programme. So we'll certainly look forward to it. Thanks, Fiona. Now, in a moment, you can hear my conversation with journalist Jen Stout, who's frequently reported from Ukraine. She'll be speaking about her book, Night Train to Odessa. Before that, some new music. This is
marching band came down along Main Street. The soldier blues fell in behind. I looked across and there I saw Billy waiting to go and join the line. And with her head upon his shoulder, his young and lovely fiancée. From where I stood I saw she was crying, and through her tears I heard her say, Billy, don't be a hero, don't be a fool with your life. Billy, don't be a hero, come back and make me your wife. And as he started to go, she said, Billy, keep your head low. Billy, don't be a hero, come back to me. The soldier blues were trapped on a hillside, the battle raging all around. The sergeant cried, we've got to hang on, boys, we got to hold this piece of ground. I need a volunteer to ride up and bring us back some extra men. And Billy's hand was up in a moment, forgetting all the words she said. She said, Billy, don't be a hero, don't be a fool with your life. Billy, don't be a hero, come back and make me your wife. And as it started to go, she said, Billy, keep your head low. Billy, don't be a hero, come back to me. I heard his fiancée got a letter that told how Billy died that day. The letter said that he was a hero, she should be proud he died that way. I heard she threw the letter away.
digging into the spiritual life of Scottish freelance journalist Jen Stout, who over the past few years has covered the war in Ukraine for major news outlets, including the BBC. Her work in Ukraine has been shortlisted for many prizes, including Amnesty International, the Scottish Press Awards, the Foreign Press Association and the Freelance Journalism Awards. Jen has now written a book, Night Train to Odessa, an account of her time in Ukraine on the front line, as well as what it was like living in Moscow in the run-up to the invasion. Well, I caught up with Jen earlier this week. We discussed her book and the sacrifice and drive needed to report in such dangerous conditions in a post-truth world.
I'd been reporting in Ukraine for 2 years, on and off, going between Shetland and Kharkiv, which is a hell of a commute, actually, I don't recommend. And I've been reporting for the Sunday Post, for Radio Scotland quite a lot, as a freelancer. And I'd started to write kind of longer pieces for London Review of Books and sort of essays. There was so much material and so many stories that don't make it into the kind of everyday reporting that I wanted to explain. I mean, in part, it's also a memoir. It's a story of how you go to cover a war, having never done that, and why you would do that. I was in Siberia. I was in Gorno-Altaysk, right in the sort of geographical heart of the continent, I suppose. I was on a programme trip. We'd just arrived on the 24th of February, which was horrendous because... I sound silly saying it was horrendous for me. I wasn't the one being bombed, but I have friends in Kharkiv and I got out the plane in Siberia. Had these messages from them saying they're bombing us with warplanes. You know, and it took me a minute to understand what that really meant, because we didn't think it would happen. No one thought it would actually happen.
But you've been spending a bit of time in Russia. You've been studying out there.
Yeah, I was on a fellowship. It was the Alpha Fellowship. It was pulled a few days after the invasion and doesn't exist anymore, but it had been going for nearly 20 years. It was that golden chance, you know, for me to get to Russia, which I've been trying to do since I was in high school when I learnt Russian. And I tried so hard, but I just couldn't. I didn't have the money, you know, to go out there. So this was everything I was waiting for. It was fully funded. We had 3 months of study and then an internship, which we kind of had to make ourselves. And my dream was to work at Novaya Gazeta, which is the investigative independent newspaper where Anna Politkovskaya works. It still kind of exists, mostly in exile. I was far too late in getting to Moscow. None of that was possible. And really, a lot of the things I loved about Russia, I couldn't find anymore because society had really degraded, I think is the word, so much.
But it was it was an unusual time for you to be there. You must have seen huge changes happening. But as a journalist, you're working on daily programmes. All the work you do has a sort of relatively short shelf life. And so what was it about that experience of being in Russia or being in Siberia at the time that the war broke out in Ukraine that made you decide, actually, this should be a book and I feel compelled to get this out?
Partly it was people at home telling me that I should do it. You know, it's always good to have encouragement and a bit of outside perspective. I was writing I couldn't really do any reporting for various reasons in Russia. And so I was writing just these long Facebook posts, just kind of impressions, photos, what was going on around me. Because I think at that time, if you remember, Russia was in the news every day, the troop build-up.
Oh, goodness, yeah.
And so it was, for them, folk back in Shetland especially, they were seeing this kind of other side. And I'm not saying... I wasn't doing a kind of, it's all lovely here and the West is wrong about Russia. Absolutely not. But just the psychology of these things. What was it like there? What were people saying to me? And I opened the book with an argument I had in a pub. Because like any good journalist, you should have lots of acquaintances and drinking buddies to learn from. And one of them was a guy called Andrei. And I remember sitting in the pub watching Russian TV, which was lots of propaganda about how there was a genocide in Donbass, which there was not. And looking at my phone, and it was opposite. It was all the troop build-up and the border. And I said to him, I'm going to have to leave. We can't stay here. And he got so angry, and he just started repeating all this stuff about, like, it was that experience where people start talking like the television. They're coming out with words that are just from the TV. Ukraine's full of Nazis. It's a regime. We have to go and liberate them. And I said, what? Are you pulling my leg? You're just saying the same propaganda, you're saying the same words. And he said, yeah, well, your side is propaganda too. And that's that thing that Peter Pomerantsev put so well. Nothing is true, everything is possible. You've stopped believing in truth as a society. It's terrifying because it's not just everything, anything is possible. Invading your neighbour, who you're supposedly such brotherly neighbours with, murder, rape, torture, execution, anything is possible.
tell us what was kind of going through your head and the chronology of events that then occurred from the point you decided you were going to stay and that you wanted to indeed continue covering the war.
I knew that, one thing I struggled with was that I'd been waiting to go to Russia for so long, for so many years, and a lot of people knew that. And I was supposed to go when I graduated, and my mother got very ill, and that didn't happen. And there was so many kind of foiled attempts. And so I was getting a lot of sympathy from people, which I was finding very difficult, not like to respond nicely, and I'd just sort of be a bit terse and say like nothing bad has happened to me. I just had to pack quickly and get out of Russia. Because, talking to my friends in Ukraine, and they're living in a basement being bombed. And they were right. Like if I'd had to go home, I would have been gutted. So there was an element of that. Like, this is a chance for me finally to go and do the kind of reporting that I always wanted to do, and that I was well prepared for by working particularly in local journalism. So working on a local paper, Stranraer and Wigtonshire Free Press, 7 years ago, and I worked on Radio Shetland, the best radio station in the world, where you really get to go outside and talk to people, which I think is quite important for journalists. And if you work in TV, you can end up not doing that very much. And you're very accountable. If you make a mistake, if you misrepresent someone, they will tell you very quickly. So that was really very good training for everything I wanted to do. And I knew that I kind of thought I could pull it off. The worries were worrying and upsetting friends and family. Not being prepared enough. So, there was a bit of kind of, you shouldn't go there because you've never done conflict reporting before, which, how do you get the experience without doing it? I don't know. But I didn't want to wade in. I wanted to get a flak jacket and get a wee bit of training and just do it as carefully as possible. It was a great big collective effort, which was happening all over Europe to help people. And they were helping me as well so that I could go and report. And part of me thought, like, how selfish of me to put people through all this worry. But I don't think that anymore. I think the kind of reporting that I was able to do made a difference, I hope, because it connected people here with what's going on there, and it explained the war to them, especially with the book. I think people, you don't want to go off on a history tangent or a politics rant, but I can show, not tell. I can explain to them why it matters through stories and anecdotes. I had a lot of encounters where people wanted immediately to talk about very deep things. And I was supposed to be asking them about, the horror. Wasn't it terrible when you had to flee your home? And they would want to talk about philosophy. I used to be a pacifist. Look how I've changed. Now I'm a serving soldier. What does war do to people? What does war do to societies? There was some shelling in Kharkiv when I got there the first day, and I was with some Ukrainian journalists, and so we ran down into the metro. It's in Saltivka, where the Russians were so close that they could just lob artillery into that part of the city. And you go down. And people have been sleeping on the floor down there for a month and a half by that point. And you think that everyone will be sort of in tears and it'll be awful. And then you talk to especially older women, and they're just so resilient and so funny and so absolutely refusing to be the victim. Do you know, and you're like, isn't this hard for you? And they're like, no, it's fine. It's fine. We can do this. And I'm like, but you're in your 70s and you're sleeping on a marble floor. Do you know, in a metro, it's cold. Yes, but, there we are. I remember that woman, she had a tartan waistcoat on, and I said, I'm from Scotland, and she was so delighted. Her name was Anna, and she's very like that motherly Ukrainian babushka thing, and sort of stroking my cheeks and saying, I solnishka. Like, she said, isn't your flak jacket too heavy? Said, well, it is a bit. And then she said, doesn't your granny worry about you? And I was I didn't, it just struck me, right? Because it disrupted that relationship of, I'm here to interview you, and she's like, what about you? And what do you even do with that? And I said, she does worry about me, because she did. I know she did in Shetland, my granny Margaret. And I just said, yes, she does. And all these old women are like, we thought so. Yeah.
Well, of course, there must have been a fascination from them as well about how on earth a young woman from Shetland found herself war reporting out there at that time. Where did your fascination for that part of the world stem from? Because you did, as you've mentioned, you grew up in Shetland. What was the journey that took you from there to Ukraine?
Yes, I grew up in Shetland, largely in Fair Isle. When I was in high school, in the Anderson High School, they offered Russian at a kind of intermediate level. And I wasn't going to school that much at that point, frankly. I didn't see the point. Things were a wee bit difficult, in my life, and I was quite rebellious, drinking and smoking. And then I just had this one teacher who changed my life because she actually cared and she listened and she taught me Russian, which I loved. I absolutely loved it. Her name's Marian Ockenden. And it was like I spoke it in a past life. I don't know why. There's no family connection at all. I love the grammar, I love the rules, I love the syntax and the poetry as well. And she took us to St. Petersburg, which, you know, I'd never really been away anywhere. Can you imagine, like, going to this huge industrial city in the winter and watching the ice floes going down the Neva? I mean, it's just extraordinary. And I remember thinking, like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to university. I'm going to get there, be a correspondent. I just, I was naive at that point about how the world actually works, do you know, with money and privilege and the increasingly difficult, exclusive world of journalism and foreign reporting. Because of all those little leg ups that you need to get to that point. You know, and we have free university in Scotland, but I worked all the time through uni in bars, had no money, and then when it came to the year abroad, you had to pay a huge amount of money to go to Russia, and I just couldn't do it.
You've encountered a number of challenges along the way.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. Now, you've also, I think this might be a nice time for us to play your chosen track. So can you tell us what it is and why you've chosen it for us?
Yeah, there are lots of songs that have a huge amount of meaning for me and often very serious and sad songs. I love Scottish folk music. But often, especially when I was travelling around Ukraine, actually, I listened to this a lot because it just makes me smile. You know, it's just joyous. And it's Champs-Élysées by Joe Dassin, which is actually, it was based on Waterloo Road by Jason Crest. And it's about... Now,
Jen, you write very movingly about the writer Victoria Amelina. Can you tell me a little bit more about her?
Yes, Vika Amelina was a novelist, a poet. She became a war crimes researcher during the war. Incredibly clever, incredibly funny. She was in a restaurant, a pizza place in Kramatorsk last year. I'd been there a few months earlier. Everybody ate there. It's one of the only places you could eat. Kramatorsk is a kind of garrison town, very military, right near the front line. And you know that there's a risk. You always know there's a risk that there'll be a missile strike. But you have to go and eat some pizza, right? When I saw that place had been hit, I thought, gosh, I hope there's no sort of colleagues, journalists in there. I never thought it would be her. I never thought it would be her. Partly because I think we all make these little deals in our head like children do, which is, not that one. Yeah, and I remember that the deal, it's the same deal I made in my head unconsciously when I was little, which is, but my mum will never get cancer. You don't realise you've made these little deals with God until he breaks them. Vika died a few days later from catastrophic brain injuries, and she had a 12-year-old son. And I'd really encourage people to read her work. Some of it's translated in English.
I'm very sorry, Jen. That sense of loss, when you have it all around you, I suspect in a war zone, I think you can tell yourself the same story that maybe it won't directly affect you. And how did you cope with that loss at the time? Was it something that you were able to process, or was writing this book part of that process?
I think writing is always helpful. Writing beautifully as well. I think like crafting it as beautifully as possible, that really helps make sense of things. And it feels like you can do people a bit of justice to who they were in their lives by writing about it. I think because I've had a lot of loss in my life, a lot, it doesn't surprise me when it happens, which is not to say it doesn't floor me, but I almost kind of expect it. That's what life is,
It's, here on the programme we talk about loss often, and, we look at many aspects of faith. You obviously described Ukrainian people as having solidarity, collective effort, and a powerful sense of common purpose. Do you have faith, and do you feel like that plays a role in how you're able to process the loss you experienced early in life and also the loss you saw firsthand being in Ukraine?
I believe in something bigger than us. I believe in the energy between us. I feel like many religions are, just the constructs that we've made to try and communicate with that, to try and feel that. I certainly believe in the sacredness of these places. There's the Kirk in Fair Isle for me is a very, very sacred place. It's very beautiful and very peaceful. And I think when people have gone to worship there for hundreds of years, it makes that place very special. I mean, obviously I was brought up going to the Kirk. Actually, we just used to swap around. So we go to the Kirk one Sunday and then the Methodist Chapel another Sunday. And I genuinely thought that's what everybody did until I got older. Yes, I suppose I've stepped away from organised religion a little, but I certainly have a very solid grounding from the values that I was brought up with, which are about love and solidarity and how much we deeply need each other and how connected we are. And that can help. It can help a bit with loss. It can.
What were the major realisations you had when you were writing about this period of your life?
Well, I had to realise some things about myself, I suppose. There were certain points. I didn't want to make the book kind of whiny, and it's enough that I'm in it a lot. That's kind of cringy enough. Yeah, that's difficult enough without sort of complaining about your heavy backpack. But I also didn't want to gloss over that element of things because it is really physically difficult to be a freelancer in a war zone, travelling around by night train with a very heavy backpack. And it was that finally me coming to terms with the fact that, like, I'm not Superwoman. I can't do everything. I can't actually carry 30 kilos on my back because I will hurt my knees. And I'll get sick. And I know that sounds silly, but I'd never really accepted that before. I'd just think, well, you just need to toughen up and be stronger. I'd be quite hard on myself, actually, a lot of the time. So, and also, I suppose I realised I'd had a gut feeling that this was exactly what I should be doing in life. And that's everything. That's wonderful. So I believe more in my gut feelings now, even if they might seem a bit mad from the outside.
Many thanks to Jen Stout, and her book Night Train to Odessa, covering the human cost of Russia's war, is published by Berlin. And of course, some of those affected by the conflict in Ukraine, which Jen just spoke about, ended up seeking safety and settling in Scotland. Well, after 9, we'll be speaking about the theme of this year's Refugee Festival Scotland, Rise. What does it take to start again after being forced to flee your own home and losing everything? Plus, are you still feeling a little bit low about the Scotland result on Friday? Oh, well, who can blame you? But we're talking about the benefits of both winning and losing a little bit later on. That's coming up before 10. First, though, the news. Making us there is the brilliant Candy Staton. Young Hearts Run Free.
Sense in sharing this one and only life, ending up just another lost and lonely wife. You count up the years and they will be filled with tears. Love only breaks up to start over again. You'll get the babies, but you won't have your man, while he's busy loving every woman that he can. My mind must be free to learn all I can about me. I'm gonna love me for the rest of my days. Encourage the babies every time they say self-preservation is what's really going on today. Say I'm gonna turn loose 1,000 times a day, but how can I turn loose?
On digital radio.
later on. And with Refugee Festival Scotland underway, we'll be exploring its theme of rise and thinking about what it takes to start over again after having lost a home, an identity and a way of life. And of course, I have a trusted panel of guests here to help me dive into all of this. They are Councillor Lama Buchama, Professor Alison Phipps and Reverend Philip Blackledge. Hello, good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Lovely to have you with us today. Now, there's lots to get our teeth into, and of course, I'm looking forward to chatting to you all in a few minutes. But before that, let's just get a little bit of music. Tomorrow marks the beginning of Refugee Week, coinciding with Refugee Festival Scotland, which began on Friday and runs until next Sunday. There's all sorts of events, from poetry to photography to sports and storytelling throughout the country, and there's even some Eid gatherings for those celebrating this week. The theme of the festival this year is Rise, and for those who've been displaced, lost their home, identity and their lives as they know it, coming to a new place, having to start again is no easy feat. So what is needed for them to make a new life? I'm joined by Philip Blackledge, who's Rector of Holy Trinity Melrose, Alison Phipps, UNESCO Chair in Refugee Integration through Languages and the Arts, and Lama Buchama, a counsellor who's worked with refugees and displaced people, including the charity REACT, Refugee Action Scotland. So, Alison, what do you think of this theme, Rise, then? Let's talk about that. Is it an apt one, given your experience working with refugees and asylum seekers?
Do you know, I think it's a fantastic theme, and there's something about Refugee Festival that's really joyful at this time of year. You know, there's so much focus on the negative, on the bad news, on all that is wrong for refugees worldwide. And to have this time, this window when there's the most light in Scotland, even if it's raining, is just fantastic. So I was just delighted when the Refugee Council said, you know, Rise will be the theme of the festival. And, you know, the next, 157 events I think we've got across Scotland coming up. My diary just looks like there's no time to sleep. It's just one long learning party. And, you know, one of the things I've often said to people who want to get hold of me at this time of year is, you'll probably find me standing on my head, trying to eat some extraordinary, delectable food I didn't know existed in the world, whilst having my feet painted with henna tattoos and talking to a journalist and hugging somebody at the same time. I mean, that's kind of the sense of it. It is a joyful time of year. And it's one where we celebrate the fact that that the hardest thing is it's bearable, and that we are still, despite all people have gone through, able to laugh and celebrate and be together and create community and start again and do extraordinary things, but also very ordinary things, and do it with this carnival atmosphere that crosses Scotland and those communities that we're in.
Oh, Lama, your thoughts and reflections on Rise as a theme this year?
I couldn't agree more with Alison. What a joyful time to be having the festival and to be celebrating people in general, refugees, New Scots, people who have come to Scotland to be part of this new community and this new home. And I think the most essential part of this is the word community, the sharing of the culture, the coming together, the meeting each other in a joyful way, not always only in the hardships. And of course, that is very important, and it's important to validate and carry people through the hard times, but it's also shedding a light on, you know, what are the successes, what are the achievements, where have we come on this journey, and where have the people come on this journey. So I think it's a brilliant time. I'm very sad that I'm not going to be able to be part of it personally, but I'm there in spirit. And I think, so kind of being welcoming, and Scotland, in my experience, in my work, has been such a welcoming place for asylum seekers and refugees. And I know throughout my work with other organizations as well, that there are a lot of people that want to carry the people who arrive in Scotland through the hardships of their journeys, including when they arrive into Scotland and when they are in this new place and new culture, and the reaching out and collaboratively working together to say, hey, how can we make this work for everyone, is very essential. And I can see it happening all the time.
And Philip, the idea of rising, does that strike a chord with your experiences working with refugees or coming across, speaking to them?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that sort of break your heart and mend them at the same time that you find with refugees, which is that you find. As a Christian priest, you know, the story of Jesus is the story of a young family who had to become a refugee in Egypt, probably travelling in a small boat to Egypt to escape tyranny. And you see that marked in Jesus's life. You know, he says, foxes have their holes and swallows have the nest, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. You know, you can see in his ministry, looking at the outcast, the people who were rejected by the society around them, he turned that pain into beauty. And actually, my relatively limited contact with refugees shows that. I work at a food bank, and the food that we were giving to a refugee family, the social workers were telling them off because they kept giving it to other people. And, you know, their first instinct is generosity. And you think, when you've got that level of human spirit inside you, there is nothing that you can't turn into something beautiful.
Yeah, Alison, from the conversations you've had, is there's something, or sometimes this period of denial or losing hope before the realisation that it's possible, that, you know, you can do this? Is there a sort of mental process that people go through when they relocate?
I mean, all of life is present in relocation and in the changes that people go through. And you know, what we experience in everyday, ordinary and very protected life when we go through change is just magnified hundreds of times for people who are forced to flee their homes and forced to constantly make decisions they would never have wanted to make. And I think about it in my own family, as many know, I'm part of a refugee family, and my daughter, she talks every year, and she's been with us now for 15 years, talks every year in a slightly different way about those moments, and it always starts with the tree in the back garden, that she had to leave that. And this was the tree that she climbed. And every year there's a bit of a story about the tree. And, it's a bit like that. People remember this tree in a different way as they grow older, or as they change, or as they have children themselves and settle. So you see that it never leaves you, but you come into an accommodation of it with your life that is very similar to the things that we accommodate in our lives. If we have a serious injury, or if we're badly defeated in something, or if we're disappointed in a career choice or in a relationship, these moments of profound disappointment or loss that are part of everyone's lives are augmented in the lives of refugees. And I think what is then made so much harder is when those that have been imagined and by refugee communities, when they are moving to a place of safety as places of safety, when they fail to be places of safety, when they fail in their duty to uphold international law and to protect refugees. And I think that is what has been the hardest part of certainly my work, and the work of many others over the last years, have been the many obstacles to people integrating over a long period of time. And I'm saying that about refugees who arrive, New Scots, but also about communities themselves, and how difficult it's often been made for people who want to offer a welcome to do that. The hotel detentions, the separation off of people into barges, into barracks, into camps over the last couple of years. All of this stops us being on the end of that beautiful generosity that is natural, that Philip was talking about. People do, and I see it all the time. People receive things when they have been welcomed, and their first gesture is to break that bread, to share that food, to offer it to others. And I think that's something that is common across many of the countries in the global south, as we call it, that generosity and sharing that comes out of deeply led community lives. And as we in Scotland try and rebuild our communities after much fracturing through modernity, the people we learn that from, and we learn it from it, we learn that in spades at this time of year, are people who are New Scots, who are refugee in background themselves.
Lama, listening to Alison there, she was talking about safe places, and that's sometimes a barrier, talking about the challenges really that refugees face when they come somewhere perhaps a safe place isn't a safe place. But in your experience counselling asylum seekers and refugees, what can help them to rise sort of forward? What allows them to embrace the new place they've found themselves living?
Well, it's a journey. I mean, it's really important for us to look at this as a whole journey, see the whole person and their whole journey. So we can't only kind of think about how do we rise and how do we move on or move away from the challenges. It's really important for us to acknowledge, the loss and the grief and the trauma, and sometimes the ongoing trauma that people are going through. And it is through that kind of the holding of that we are able to start to ground and come to the present, and then maybe move away from that into how do I connect, how do I belong, how do I find the belonging and rebuild my life. But it takes time, and it's very individual and different for people. So, for example, I work with people who are Gazan evacuees in Egypt, and they're in a completely different state than the people who perhaps have been granted the refugee status here in Scotland, for example. And thinking about the uncertainty of their situation, it's really difficult for them to think about how do I rise, where do I go from here? Although it can be really inspirational and grounding to see let's call them, I don't want to call them successful stories actually, but people who have built or rebuilt their lives. And I think what really works and helps with that is, again, the community. So it's the person themselves, their internal resilience and ability for change and fluidity and movement, but also the external bit, the system that is welcoming, the system that is saying, hey, how can we connect with you and allow you to grow within this new place that you arrive in, and the people as well, meaning the community that is reaching out to them. But what I want to say and reaffirm is that everyone is on a different journey, just like all humans. We're all on a different journey. So we can't just expect people to do it at the same pace and in the same ways.
Mm-hmm. Philip, there's so much really that we take for granted, and sometimes when you see life through a new lens, when you're speaking to people who've been forced to flee their country, who have relocated here, it's things, things that we take for granted are quite very simple, like just being able to go to the shop or take your children to school or going to a meeting. And they're all huge challenges when you're in a foreign land, especially, aren't they? When you don't speak the language, that can be a huge barrier. Is conquering them what we mean by rising up? Is it essentially being able to live your life as normally as possible and thriving? Is that what we mean?
I guess you think when you have everything removed from you, you were interviewing the Astronomer Royal earlier, and I spoke to a refugee, and he said the first thing I noticed was the stars were different. Because you've had to come so far across the world that you look up in the sky and the stars aren't the same as the ones that you slept under. And that's a huge cultural change for you, just to think, you're not looking at the southern stars anymore, you're looking at the northern ones. And when you have no job, when all the markers that we have of ourselves, your job, your house, your culture, your social standing has gone, you're sort of back in your core self. And you think, how many of us ask ourselves, who are we outside of all those things? And these are the questions often refugees have to ask themselves. Yeah. And to find a way into a culture which is so different from you can only be done if that culture wants you. Mm-hmm. If that culture knows that it's going to feel richer for your presence. So, I would always say to people, if you have some refugees or some asylum seekers who have been living with you and you think, is it my place to make contact? It is. Yeah. It is your place, because you will be the richer for it and so will they. And that's how we become not just a place that integrates refugees into our culture. It's a culture that becomes richer for them.
You've given us all some really interesting thought, I think, for this morning, and the idea of rise not simply being survival, it's the stage after surviving in a new place, isn't it? We go from surviving to rising up. Many thanks, Alison, Lama and Philip, and you can find out more information about the events taking place at refugeefestivalscotland.co.uk. I think Alison gave us a very good insight into what will be happening there. Lots of food, lots of events to embrace and enjoy, so please do head along and check that out. And for everyone who is celebrating, of course, Eid Mubarak, because it's Eid today. So I, for one, have a trough of baklava that I'll be taking to celebrate with my family a little bit later on. Now, next we'll be turning our attention to an interesting meeting of minds in the new Anthony Hopkins film Freud's Last Session. But first, let's get some music.
my favorite tune. The good times always end too soon. Everybody's dancing. Let your feet have some fun. Come on, everybody, get on your feet. Clap your hands. Everybody screaming. Everybody dance. Doo-doo-doo. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Everybody dance. Doo-doo-doo. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Everybody dance. Doo-doo-doo. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Everybody dance. Doo-doo-doo. Clap your hands. Clap your Everybody dance. Doo-doo-doo. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Everybody dance. Doo-doo-doo. Clap your hands. Clap your hands. Everybody dance.
Now, facing death is often the moment when one reflects on their life and belief systems and wonders if they got it right. That's exactly what two big thinkers from the 20th century do in a new film called Freud's Last Session. Psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who was brought up Jewish and became an atheist, invites the author C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist and became a devoted Christian, into his home. So let's hear a clip.
You've insisted all your life that the very concept of God is ludicrous.
Yes.
So why do you care what I think if you're satisfied in your disbelief? Why am I here?
Why? Curiosity. Why someone of your supreme intellect would suddenly abandon truth and then then embrace a ludicrous dream, an insidious lie.
What if it isn't a lie? Have you ever considered how terrifying it would be to realize that you're wrong?
Oh, not half as terrifying as it would be for you, my friend. No. You said earlier that you will challenge my worldview. You challenge my belief in disbelief. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Good. Wunderbar. Welcome to my den.
Now, in the fictional meeting, the pair come together the day World War II breaks out. Freud is in the final days of his life battling oral cancer, supported by his daughter, who's making her name as the pioneer of child psychoanalysis. Lewis is battling PTSD from his experience in World War I. There's a lot going on. Now, Philip Blackledge, rector of Holy Trinity in Melrose, Lama Bushama, a counsellor brought up in the Muslim faith, and Alison Phipps, professor of languages and intercultural studies at the University of Glasgow, are all still with me, and you've all watched the film. So, Philip, just give us a quick introduction. It was a very good clip that we played there, wasn't it? It gives you a bit of an idea, an insight.
Yes, and as you said, somebody who was an atheist became a Christian, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And the conversation it felt like me having a conversation with the two halves of my brain in a way. You have the sort of C.S. Lewis, who is the sort of very right-brained, wondering, exploring, and Freud, which is the sort of mapping, sort of technical side. And how those two sides of each other's brains interact in the conversations. It's quite a claustrophobic film.
Oh.
It feels quite sort of enclosed, and maybe that's related to sort of Freud's last days, where he was getting more and more immobile, and his autonomy was being taken away. But you also saw the claustrophobia inside C.S. Lewis, where he was, still traumatized by the events that he's still trying to make sense of. So it's a really interesting exploration. It's almost like, one of those sort of Dawkins Christian atheist debates retrojected into the 1930s. And of how sometimes those two sides of our brains don't necessarily talk to each other terribly well.
And it very much felt like that sort of conversation, wasn't it? Now, Lama, they were both rooted in the times and shaped by their own personal experiences of loss and trauma. Did seeing them reflect on that during the course of the film give you a sense that of how these men were, who they were, and how their work was then informed as a result.
Yeah, I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of the movie, is where you can see the layers of their kind of lives and their histories, and how that informs who they become as people and then as professionals or as thinkers. So for me, it was really nice to be able to see bits of that. And the influence of the trauma, the PTSD symptoms that C.S. Lewis was having, for example, and how that might have informed his belief or his seeking to believe and to be grounded. Faith can be a very regulating part for the nervous system if you have that kind of faith and the rootedness of that. And we can see Freud's, or we can see parts of Freud's traumas from childhood and the losses and the grief and how that informs his way of thinking, and the loss of his one of his children in that as well. But I think for me, it didn't really capture the kind of the coming together, or how these, different views come together. I don't know about everyone else, but that's my sense.
But but you were obviously taken by the themes of it, and I think it seems like there were some. It was thought provoking, wasn't it, Alison? I'm just going to pick up there on something that Lama said, and where she's talking about that belief, and of course the doubt that existed there as a result of trauma. There's lots of suffering in the world, and I think there's lots to reflect on with that. And in this film, that's exactly what they do. How could God allow all of these horrible things to happen? What did you make of it as an exploration into belief and doubt?
I felt that the debates, and it's a little as Philip was characterising it, I felt that the debates were a bit contrived and possibly dated. I felt like us going back to being an undergraduate, arguing points of faith and theology and philosophy. And I love that. So I was thinking this would be great for, undergraduate courses on philosophy. It's all there. And, we've got all these quotes from, C.S. Lewis as an apologist of the Christian faith, and then Freud with, very modernist views and atheist views, but also some of that context in which those are formed. But for me, what's interesting today, viewing those debates, is how we are seeing two highly elite relationships brought together under pressure and having faced death or having faced destruction. So, the figure of Freud at this point, he's a refugee, highly concerned for his daughter, and he's experienced her 12-hour detention, which was why he fled in the end from Vienna after she was taken by the Nazis. And he says, very tellingly, he said, when that happened, those 12 hours detention, I suddenly recognized the face of the monster. And I thought, about my own experiences of dear ones being taken into detention as a result of the policies of this country, and what that does to you. That tears you apart when you watch a loved one suffer. And you get a similar sense with Lewis as well. His changes around his relationships with his best friend, the promise to his best friend who dies, I will take care of your mother, and then that rejection by that mother. So all of those ways in which that plays out, I think, are very interesting, particularly in a class of people who were not used to necessarily suffering. And I think that, to me, is really interesting when people don't have recourse to strong helps in their life, be that faith, be that philosophy, and how they then start to doubt and question. So there you have Freud, pretty much on his deathbed, asking questions of faith, and you have C.S. Lewis asking questions of love and relationship, and converting to a faith. And I think all of that for me was a very interesting context. That means it's not easily we can't easily read it across to ordinary everyday life. These are highly unusual men in highly unusual circumstances.
But the situation maybe is not necessarily, or the conversations, should I say, are not necessarily unusual, because I think we will all at some point in our life have had discussions about our faiths, our belief systems, and perhaps with people who have very opposite views from us. Philip, did you think that they both gave each other the sort of respect and time and space to listen? Were they listening and understanding and hearing each other's views?
In a way, that I think that film shows the problem with that, because they come from such different perspectives that, and you see this a lot with the sort of religious atheist debates. You feel like it's two monologues happening at the same time sometimes. That they're different, they're same words, different language. And they're both trying to make sense of difficult lives. And I think the sort of the lesson that the film teaches about Freud is you won't always have a map. You won't always understand the things that are happening to you. And there's, of course, the danger in the sort of C.S. Lewis, the theist thing, is that you escape into a sort of fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But those two things have to exist and do exist in tension with one another. I mean, Freud was so, and Anna, his daughter, was so into sort of child psychology. And I often meet people in my job who, you think, that our brains are wired when we're 3 years old or 2 years old, and unless we keep rewiring our brain, we have a 3-year-old doing the plumbing inside our minds. So we do need to constantly recheck ourselves and to make sure that, it's an adult in the room rather than a frightened 3-year-old when we're encountering difficult situations. And Freud was brilliant at sort of bringing that out. But that can't be a universal truth, because life is richer and more complex than our ability to map it.
And we need that debate, as I think, we're sort of debating slightly around the context of it all today. But I'm more interested to dive into that psychology there, because, Freud obviously was very much the father of modern psychology, Lama, wasn't he? Are we good at that now? Are we having the right conversations with ourselves in our mind? And certainly, does Freud's opinion still hold a lot of weight? His theories still relevant?
Well, they are the foundation of psychotherapy, aren't they? And they have their place, and they're very important in our modern day psychology. However, I went into the movie watching it kind of having studied some of Freud's theories, and I had my personal reservations about that, because I feel like he has a very kind of deterministic, very Freud way of looking at the world and making up theories. And I think, I'm not going to take away from the importance of the work that he has done.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think we moved away from that way of kind of looking at someone and hearing their stories and kind of determining what's wrong with them. And now we think of them as, in the context of who they are and the environment that they are in. We're also, or at least in my practice, I'm very relational, or we are very relational. So it's about, who are you in relation to the world, the environment, your family situation? And I think that kind of brings us away from, again, what's wrong with you and the deficiencies that you had in yourself. So I think we moved quite a bit from where Freud started. But again, we don't want to take away from the work he has done.
I mean, just briefly, Philip, I'm interested to know your reflection on Freud's work as a man of faith.
I employ a lot of his techniques in a lot of my job, so it's not as though that's that antithetical. I think what the film really brought out was that the bits of Freud that was 3 years old really came out in the end. He was actually terribly manipulative to his daughter, and he was sort of crying out to her on the phone that he's in pain and he needs her there right now. And a bit of a case of physician, heal thyself. Mm-hmm. He never escaped his own self, and we can't. Mm-hmm. So I think that the place of that sort of psychoanalytical work is really, really important, as long as we know that won't give us the answer to everything. We have evolved to be safe. We have not evolved to be happy. So getting that side of our life sorted out is going to take a bit more work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Alison, just very briefly there, Philip was talking about the relationship that Freud had his with his daughter. And you know and certainly C.S. Lewis and his dead friend's mother, Mrs. Moore, they had quite an intriguing relationship. What did you make of the complexities around relationships?
I mean, I was really glad to see that being explored a bit more, because I think it gave permission for us to see people in a much wider understanding of that word love. What does it mean to love? What does it mean to manipulate? What does it mean to have strong feelings for someone within what are often quite straight-jacketing conventions of society? And you see these people who can't be bound by that in their lives, even if they have these dogmas or beliefs of their own. And we see that in both C.S. Lewis and in Freud in the film, in the way that they're portrayed in the film. And yet somehow love escapes all. And there's something really, really quite extraordinary about that, I think. And the sense that not everything is in control. There's this line that C.S. Lewis uses with Freud in the film where he says, 20,000 killed in just 2 days. It's impossible to take in. And there's something there about love for the world and love for people and it being impossible to take in. These numbers we hear from Gaza, it's impossible to take it in. But equally, that the love that you meet in an individual is also impossible to take in, and that, the map wasn't working, as Philip said.
Well, there were some lovely themes to explore in that, and it was really great to hear your thoughts on such an interesting film. That was Freud's Last Session, which is currently on in cinemas. Now, you're listening to Sunday Morning with me, Zara Janjua. If you've missed any of the show, including the conversations I had with screenwriter Dav James, who's behind the BBC drama Lost Boys and Fairies, and the journalist Jen Stout, you can catch it up again with that on BBC Sounds. Just search for Sunday Morning.
Summer to you, we hope you're having fun. Whether it is raining or you're basking in the sun. Now here comes the bad news, today's the longest day. Then it's getting darker and Christmas is on the way. The Chris Moyle Show, happy summer everyone. BBC Radio 1.
Now, in a few minutes, if you're still agonising over the Scotland game on Friday, well, we'll be exploring the benefits of winning and losing and why experiencing them is not just inevitable, but can be valuable too. Now, new music first from the Two Door. What a night it was on Friday, wasn't it? Oh gosh, well, many of us were on the edge of our seats as Scotland and Germany kicked off the Euros, and we'll hope it turned very quickly to disappointment as we were dealt a crushing blow. But worry not, we're back on the field on Wednesday, and I'm sure the team will go over every manoeuvre, good and bad, to assist the next game. Sport is obviously a very great tool to help us think through winning and losing and how we deal with both. Failing, of course, is something that we might not enjoy, but certainly a few of us can attribute the successes we enjoy to past failures. So let me ask my panel. We have Philip Blackledge, Professor Alison Phipps and Councillor Lama Bushema. Let's come to you first, Alison. Have you failed much in life? How have you found your failure experiences?
Do you know, I think the whole of life and the whole of my life is built on failure. I mean, one of the things about being a linguist and having an area of languages that you work in is that the only way you can learn another language as an adult is by making an awful lot of mistakes. In fact, the only way you can learn a language is by making an awful lot of mistakes. And, we see this in wee ones when they're first coming into language and the things they say and the way they use it and the funny things they say. But, I remember my Portuguese language teacher, starting her class with us all as beginners and just saying, I want mistakes and I want failure and I want lots of it and I want thousands of them. And so, as somebody who now speaks languages, several languages.
How many languages do you think?
Not enough.
Oh, I mean, great answer, clearly.
Not enough. But I think
enough to put us to shame, I'm sure.
I actually believe there's something about that humility in learning something new. And it's the same with learning a musical instrument or a sport, a new technique. You have to fail to be able to come to a point of dexterity and ability. And there's something about being properly humbled by the things others can do really well that is good for us
and
as
to
human
be on
beings.
The back foot. What about you,
right.
Lana? What about you?
Did you say Lama?
Yeah, what about you, Lama?
Well, I think, like Alison said, you have to fail in order to kind of move away from the stuckness of failure. And life is just filled with failures. I don't know if I want to use the word failure, actually, because failure is always connected to growth and learning and kind of moving from that stuckness of being in that place of, oh no, I can't do this, or I like Scotland, for example, not winning, does that mean that I stop here? No, let's come back and let's try something else and let's move away from that. But yes, I have failed many times and I still am failing every day, but I'm learning and growing.
Philip.
Yeah, I thought finally a subject that I'm an expert in. It's really, there was a really interesting psychological study done ages ago about millennial sects, the ones who thought the world was coming to an end, and what happened after they realised that the world hadn't come to an end. And the really interesting thing about that, and you often see that in referenda as well, people vote, for the losing side. They actually became far more passionate about their faith, these millennial sects, when it didn't work.
Yeah, okay.
So the failure was actually a sort of a motivator to make them completely re-examine their faith, and their faith became much stronger in a slightly different direction. So actually, failure can really embed you in the passion of what you like. The real terrible news was this morning. The Scotland cricket team got knocked out of the Cricket World Cup, and they only lost to Australia, who are the ones who are going to win.
Don't need you to tell us more failures of Scotland's in sport, do we?
Important.
We don't need to remind her more.
But when I heard that, when I sort of woke up and heard it, I thought, I must get more involved in cricket again, because it's just so beautiful, even when we lose. There's some weird psychological trick in your brains that when you fail, you dig in.
See, there is, but I think we become a bit obsessed with winning, don't we? Perhaps from quite a young age, and there's this almost fear attached, isn't there, Alison, to the idea of losing that's embedded from quite a young age. Why is that?
Yeah, I think failure is embarrassing. shame is a hard thing for us as human beings, perhaps one of the hardest things for us to deal with in social life. It may be something we can deal with quite privately, but socially we don't like to admit to our failures. And I was just thinking as Philip was talking that, we're going to see a resurgent Tartan army clearly on Wednesday who have re-examined their commitment and will be even louder and prouder. And, somebody said to me, honestly, if Scotland can take this kind of failure, there is nothing we can't take. So there's something in that ebb and flow of the highs and lows of life and the failures and the wins. And, we all have them all, that I think, builds us up into people who can contain lots, hold lots. But we can only do that if we do it collectively, if we do it together. So there's something about us being able to shine a light or have people help us shine a light on our losses and on our failures that is important. And that's where, Lama and her work is so important, where Philip and his work is so important, or whoever it is who helps us after a bump. I have a box of tissues in my office because students fail or they don't do as well as they want. And I need to be able to close the door and give them a tissue and make them a cup of tea and tell them from 30 years experience, the world has not ended, and that there's no shame in a defeat by a more skilled or a more moneyed or a more powerful opponent, but also that there is no shame in this place where you learn something new for the future and you can pick that up and take it on. And often they're the best people at things later on after that lesson.
Oh, for sure. And actually, coming back to the game, I was thinking about the post-match coverage I was watching and some of the interviews I saw, and one in particular which really stood out was a young man in Munich, a young Scottish fan, and the reporter asked him, listen, how are you feeling? Scotland defeated 5-1, and he said, I'm just here to have a good time.
Yeah.
And nothing could have knocked that resilience out of him. He seemed so happy, and she was a bit flummoxed by his response and didn't know how to really react to that, because she'd been expecting him to be devastated. And I thought it was a wonderful reaction really to have in the face of failure. Is it attitude, Philip? Do we need to think about our attitude towards this?
Yeah, I was just thinking as Alison was talking there, it's a very combative world we live in, a world where you have success or failure. I mean, sport has always been basically controlled war right from the beginning, whether it's in the Roman arena or the Greek Olympics. It's a way of investing that sort of instinctive desire to win in a safe way. But actually so much of our society is structured in that, I might say, sort of very male desire to beat other people. And I mean, the Christian faith, the early Christian faith, was sort of the opposite of that. We celebrate somebody who was a total failure in his life. His ministry died with his friends running away and, being publicly executed and humiliated. And if you look at the Acts of the Apostles, the sort of the early resurrection church, they didn't buy into the success or failure metric, so they were imprisoned and they sang songs and they were beaten with rods and they said, oh, well, thank you very much for helping us to understand the pain our Lord went through. And, they just refused to buy into this, we are weak because in the eyes of success or failure, we are failures. So, the Christian church at its best has always been sort of beautiful losers. And I think there's something really important that we need to examine, particularly in a world where sport used to be amateur and it's now a religion.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And it's interesting that you've put it in that context as well. I think I'm looking at this from a very young age. And, even when we were doing school sports day, that's probably when it was first instilled in us, or playing past the parcel. And, if you didn't win, there was nothing worse than a winner that gloated, was there? There was nothing worse than that. But Lama, should everyone be a winner? Should everyone get a prize at that sort of thing? Because, of course, that's what's happening now at children's parties and sports days. Everyone gets a prize. Is that the right thing to do, or is it quite harmful?
Zara, what is winning? Can we define winning? Because, it can mean anything.
Trophies, usually.
well, that's what we reward winning with. It's the reward. And I think, not everyone is going to be a winner. And I think understanding that we are going to fail, having those experiences of failure is important for us to actually savor the moments when we win. So, we want to cheer people on. We want to reach a hand out to them and say, hey, well done, you tried. You did this at sports day and you ran and you persisted. But we also, don't want to make the focus on the winning, that you have to be the first or the best. But yes, I always say, yes, let's foster the goodness in people trying to do things, not necessarily focusing on, oh no, you won today. It's more, you tried today. Great.
I think we get sometimes into the point of fetishizing failure in a sense that we also say, it's so good to fail because look at these success stories of people who've come through it. And actually, it's the attitude of lifelong learning that really I think most of them have had instilled in them for some time. Just very briefly, Philip, some words of encouragement to someone that's failed out there and they're sitting thinking about it at the moment and dwelling on it.
Well, firstly, you're in really good company. Not long ago, I was playing a game of badminton with a friend of mine who is very into winning, and he wasn't winning, and he got more and more angry. And I remember saying to him, look, if I win, it's not my fault.
Oh, Philip. Thank you. I think that's a great one to end on. Alison Phipps, Lama Bouchema and Philip Blackledge, thank you so much for your company this morning. It has been an absolute pleasure. And win or lose, we are completely behind our team in Germany and very, very proud of them, no matter what stage they get to. Now, next Sunday morning, I'll be speaking to the worldwide best-selling author Alexander McCall Smith, so do join me for that if you can. I will leave you with one final song. Bernard Butler is playing in Edinburgh. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Bye-bye.
There are people who have let the problems of today lead them to conclude that for them life is not the way. But every problem has an answer, and if yours you cannot find, you should talk it over to him. He'll give you peace of mind. When you feel your life's too hard, just go have a talk with God. Many of us feel we walk alone without a friend, never communicating with one who lives within, forgetting all about the one who never ever let you down. And you can talk to him anytime, he's always around. When you feel your life's too hard, just go have a talk with God. That's known throughout the world for solving the problems of all men, women, little boys and girls. When you feel your life's too hard, just go have a talk with God. When you feel your life's too hard, just go have a talk with God. Your load's too much to bear, just go talk to God, He cares. When you feel your life's too hard, just go have a talk with God. Thank you.